ACC meetings are this week in Amelia Island. They actually get going today, Joe. And I feel like Florida State wants to move on the way they've been talking as of late. Their new athletic director, Mike Alford, has been there 2 years. The way that dude's talking, he's getting chesty. He's getting chesty with it. He wants his money, Joe, and that's going to be the hot topic at ACC meetings. Unequal revenue share being the hot topic. I know North Carolina wants it. We've talked to AD Bubba Cunningham about that. But he's been a little bit more behind the scenes with it. Florida State's been out front. They want the financials to change because they feel they're a big dog in this conference.
Yeah, something's going to have to change with Florida State and Clemson. You and I have talked before about how I think it's fair to say, and when we're not wearing a tinfoil hat when we say this as NC State grads, that North Carolina and Duke have pretty much run the ACC from the jump. And yes, there has been a seismic shift in power, not just because John Swofford is no longer the commissioner, which was slightly overblown when it came to his Carolina connections, but also because of a turnover in the balance of power, right? And also what matters to the league. The league forever was a basketball league. Well, the truth of the matter is now in college sports, you better have your football right. The ACC has improved its football. It has. That is fair to say. But some of these schools, Florida State and Clemson, on the top of that list, would like for their revenue to change. Now, where and how do you do that? You and I have discussed that the real move here for the ACC is to start paying the players, is to cut them into the media rights. And I don't see a shift towards that. I read the Athletic article this week about a group of 5 coaches basically saying how about tampering and how, bigger the Power 5 schools are basically poaching their rosters. The Eastern Michigans, the Akrons, the Macs, even the AACs of the world are like, what the heck are we supposed to do? We're becoming a feeder system. And I read that article thinking to myself, hey guys, all you got to do is take our idea. Now, their media rights isn't as great as what the ACC has, but obviously the ACC is so far behind the Big Ten, so far behind the SEC, that Florida State, short of joining the Big Ten, because I got news for you, Joe and AD at Florida State, the SEC doesn't want you. Florida doesn't want you.
Okay.
They do not want you in your league.
Let's get to
you
that.
Better go. You better get nice to whoever's going to be running the Big Ten.
You got to the heart of the issue. And at some point, Jim Phillips or another AD is going to have to pull Mike Alford aside and be like, buddy, you're stuck until the grant of rights runs out, and then you're going to be scrambling with everybody else. So let's circle back on what Mike Alford said. He did an interview with Warchant and doubled down on something they had talked about 3 months ago. Remember that Board of Trustees meeting where they talked about financials and everything else? And he was asked questions about the grant of rights, and we had to kind of put the hammer down on, buddy, I don't think you understand how the grant of rights works, which is weird considering you're in charge. But this is the quote. There's so many choice quotes, but this is the first one from Alford to Warchant. Quote, I make no bones about it that we're the top brand in the conference. And when you look at how they measure media contracts with households, viewership, and championships, we're driving that viewership for our conference at a high rate. That is a bold statement for a program that hasn't won the Atlantic Division since 2014 and then saw the bottom fall out in the Jimbo Fisher era. And they finally seemed like they've got something going with Mike Norvell, but who knows if last year wasn't fool's gold. Again, they had a really great season. They won 10 games, but they did not take advantage of a down Clemson year that Clemson took their corners back last year. So when you say that you're the top, no, you're not. You are absolutely not right now, and you haven't been for almost 10 years. And then here's the quote that really makes me mad, and I might actually curse for the first time on the podcast. Alford said, quote, I've made it abundantly clear that there's a $30 million gap with the SEC, essentially what he's saying, that's starting next season. And that can't go on for years because then you just can't catch up. Buddy, I got news for you. You're never catching up. We talked about this with Bubba Cunningham, the AD at North Carolina, a few months ago, Joe. And remember, I kind of pushed back because he's for this. And I'm thinking to myself, how much more money do you think you're going to get in unequal revenue share? 3 million, 4 million, 5 at best? Is that 5 million really going to close the gap with the SEC? No. Which then gets me to my ADs in other schools looking at Mike Alford going, all right, like call the bluff. I'm looking for an AD to call bullshit on Mike Alford and the way that he's talking. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? What's your leverage? You're going to test the grant of rights when that goes until 2036? You got a group of schools that's willing to test it with you? Because remember, we talked to a lawyer about this. You would need like at least a third of the schools to truly challenge the grant of rights. You got those numbers? You don't. Yeah. And what promises can you make? Oh, okay, we got what we wanted. Are you still going to try to have backdoor channel conversations with the SEC? Of course you are. Look at what Texas and Oklahoma did. Texas got everything they wanted. Still couldn't win in the Big 12. Didn't participate in the college football championships, despite the fact all of the money they were making. And they still left for the SEC, and they never talked out loud about it. And that gets to your point, Joe. FSU's talking way too much out loud to be a school that truly feels like they've got some sort of interest from another conference. You don't talk like that if you actually are making moves behind the scene. It's clout chasing. That's all Alford's doing. He is clout chasing for his constituents, and they get on Twitter and they argue with other ACC fans. It's the dumbest thing, and I want people to call them out on it.
Yeah, if you're sitting on a monster, if you have a secret deal with the Big Ten, and to be clear, that would be their path, would be for the Big Ten to which is now in California. Let's not put it past them to go into Florida. I'd say no SEC because Florida, Alabama, and Georgia would have no interest in propping up another monster, right? Like, think of it that way. The SEC thinks so little of Texas and Oklahoma. Texas, the richest school in the country, in the best recruiting spot in the country. They think so little of them that they've added them. Think about that. Think about that. Okay? It's it hurts your brain a little bit.
It kind of does.
When you start thinking about it. Now, money helps, Joe. Money definitely helps, but it's not the only answer because look at Ohio State. Look at Texas. They regularly spend the most money, and Ohio State had a championship with Urban Meyer, but before that, you got to go back to the 70s, and then the same with Texas. Yeah, they won one with Mac Brown, but before that, you got to go back to the 70s. So, yes, money matters, but at some point, coaching and the right structure takes you to that title.